and welcome to Business Incorporated live on Channels Television. We'll see the Thursday trade. That's moving along right now. Here's what's coming up. Airtel Africa is taking its fastest growing mobile money business to the London Stock Exchange. What could the planned IPO mean for investors? Kenya says it's drawing a line on the unpaid government bills as Treasury begins planning for the 2027-2028 budget. And Ghana's central bank keeps interest rates on hold, choosing caution as rising geopolitical tensions in the Middle East threaten to push global oil prices higher. Talking about oil prices, they are higher again with Brent crude, testing new highs. Maybe might be making a run to $100 again at this point after losing that level for a while now. And it's about what's playing out again right there around the Strait of Hormuz and other oil straits there. You see WTI crude $89.84, trying to make a run back above the $90 level of a barrel. Then we see Brent crude, that's at 98.13, 4.41% higher. And definitely we see the spread between Brent and WTI. That's gotten much wider at this point with this latest run. And we see natural gas, that's up 0.75%, trying to make a run back to $3 again. Let's get a check on metals now. We see gold's 5-hour chart. That's pivoting around $4,118, flashing caution as bullish momentum runs headlong into the long-term downtrend. And that was seen red on the screen for most of the metals that we track now. Spot gold, 1.38% lower. Spot silver, that's a bigger drop, 1.91%, $59.15 per ounce. Platinum, that's down 1.13%. And palladium, 2.27%. At this point, we see investors there trying to understand what's playing out with oil prices, definitely also factoring that inflation story. And that's what we're seeing gold actually dropping. It was rising with oil before now, but that's changed course in the Thursday trade. Let's get a check on other stories now. Airtel Africa, they're taking another major step in unlocking value from its fast-growing fintech business. The telecoms giant plans to list its mobile money unit on the London Stock Exchange. What could become one of Africa's biggest fintech listing. The move comes as digital payments continue to reshape financial services across the continent. Definitely, analysts will be trying to wonder how this would impact investors and also that fintech industry at this point. All right, to other stories now. We see in Kenya, we see the national budget there. The Treasury is saying the government agencies will no longer be allowed to accumulate new pending bills in a bid to improve public finances and strengthen accountability. But can the policy effectively be enforced at this time? That is the question right there in Kenya. And we also see Nigeria strengthening its position as a key driver of regional tourism, with Ghana identifying it as the country's second largest source of international visitors. More than 176,000 Nigerians traveled to Ghana in 2025, highlighting deepening business, cultural, and leisure ties between the two West African nations. And still in Ghana, we see Ghana's central bank, they've kept their benchmark interest rate unchanged, choosing caution as geopolitical tensions and rising oil prices threaten to fuel inflationary pressures. The decision reflects growing uncertainty over the global outlook and its potential impact on the domestic economy. Definitely we're looking at the latest decisions so far for most of the African countries and the central banks at this point. And it's a whole sentiment right there from these countries that we track. We see South Africa's biggest retailer. They're making a major bet on the country's informal economy. Retail giant Pepka is investing 21.3 billion rands, about $1.3 billion, to combine two fintech platforms, creating one of the country's largest merchant payment networks. The move underscores the growing importance of township businesses and informal traders in driving, retail growth and financial inclusion. And now to our first conversation. Artificial intelligence is no longer just a futuristic concept. It's already transforming industries, changing how businesses operate and reshaping economies around the world. In Nigeria, AI is finding practical applications in agriculture, healthcare, financial services, and education. But while the opportunities are enormous, major barriers remain, from unreliable power supply and limited internet access to the shortage of local computing infrastructure and AI models that could truly understand, Nigerian languages. Joining me now is David Taiwo Balogun, as also a data scientist, joining me right here in the studio for this conversation. It's great to have you.
Yeah, thank you, Ladi. It's good to be here.
Fantastic. So, looking at Nigeria's AI readiness, now we see a population of about 240 million people, internet subscriptions, 151.6 million, broadband penetration, I believe that's an improvement of about 55.67%, smartphone penetration, 62 to 65%. Let's not even talk about the cost of a smartphone at this time. That's another story, with the weakness of the Naira. Mobile data costs about 30 cents for about 0.45 gig. Average power supply, 8 to 10 hours per day. Commercial data centers, that's about 30 plus at this point. Looking at this data now, are we ready for artificial intelligence?
Yeah, thank you for having me here once again. So looking at this data, to be honest, I don't think we are ready. But I think one thing we have to note is we are making deliberate efforts, right? And this is leading towards improvement. And I'm going to be starting with the power supply, right? So looking at the power supply and the whole recent development we'll be having, right? All thanks to solar power, and everyone is trying to find a means of getting power in their residence, office, and all that. And we can say that at kind of leapfrog, right? In terms of improvement, we're having kind of improvement, and also in terms of the capacity of the the guys providing power supply, right? It's kind of increased over time. And when we look at commercial data center, it can be better, if you ask me. And recently, all thanks to MTN recently had a new data center, and I think we have to clamor on having data centers across Africa. And one of the major limitation we would have is we don't have localized data. When I mean localized data, in terms of having data for Africans within Africa, right? So we can use this in development of our AI development and all that. So we don't have to just ship ready-made product from Western world into our own ecosystem, right? A perfect example is, the likes of ChatGPT and all that. If we can have it localized, where I can just use some AI system that can tell me or interpret my local dialect for me 100% accurate, right? We need to work in that also. One other thing again I will speak on is the smartphone penetration. In as much as 62%, it can be better, 62 to 65%. It can be better in the sense that not everyone is having access to mobile device, right? And the cost you kind of, in acquiring one of these is very, very high.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because there was a time you could get a, high-end, mobile phone for about 300,000 naira.
Yeah, 300.
But that has changed.
It has changed.
Now we're seeing about 2 million to 3 million.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. One important thing again is we kind of seen some fintech, trying to do a model of pay small, or even when you go to Computer Village, for instance, you see some of these guys selling devices over there. They will tell you, pay a bulk payment, maybe like 20% or 30%, and you pay over time, right? In as much that is also good, and it's also kind of encouraging people to own more mobile device. It can also be better. And in terms of broadband penetration, this is a very, very good one. And I think over time we've seen improvement in our broadband penetration. One of the major challenges we're having now is all these local area, right? So if you can have a means of penetrating into it, where you can, take your phone and call someone in a village in Ogbomoso or somewhere in, remote villages, literally. And one important one again, I think I would want to mention here is the mobile data cost. It's still very high, to be honest.
Yeah, about 30 cents.
Yeah, it's still very, very high. It's still very, very high. Right? So if you can have a way of beating it down or bringing it down, one of the issues we've seen over time, I get to mentor and teach people also in the data and AI space. And one of the feedback I get from my students most times is data is expensive, to be honest, right? So someone who is trying to afford to eat 3 times in a day sometimes will struggle to buy internet on the phone.
You have to factor in data.
You have to factor in data, right? When you speak to university students, they most times want to look for free Wi-Fi because they don't have internet. So these are issues we have to also deal with.
Okay, so let's look at where use cases, real world use cases right here in Nigeria. We've heard, about agriculture. AI, we're seeing solutions there. Banking, that one is a given, at this point. What other sectors are you seeing artificial intelligence?
So one of the important sector I think you mentioned already is in the banking, in the finance space. We've seen it predominantly, and also in the agricultural space. Last week I was privileged to present a paper at the University of Ibadan where I spoke on CNN, right? So trying using CNN model to be able to detect these disease in pests and crops, right? So one of the objective or one of the key takeaway from the paper basically is we've been able to develop some of these solutions, but one of the major things we have to do is in terms of deployment, right? So as a farmer, you can go into your farm And using all these devices, you can easily detect anomalies in your plant, right? So you don't have to manually start going through the plant or trying to track and notice the type of diseases, right? So if it's a kind of disease, you can easily know the, prevention or the cure you can kind of put into it, right? One other interesting part we are seeing is the health sector, right? So in the health sector, we've seen a big shift. I don't have to go to the hospital literally to, there's the telemedicine. I can just stay in my house, open my app, tell the prompt what I think is wrong with me in terms of my symptoms thereabout. It's going to tell me what I need to do and if I need to go to the hospital thereabout, right? So these are improvements, right? And also one important sector I think we would need to talk about also is in the logistics sector, right? So we've seen AI penetrating it. We've kind of not seen it predominantly in Africa, but when you go to more developed country, you would see robots going to deliver goods, right? There's a company in Germany, forgotten the name. They kind of use AI system, right, to robots to deliver goods. So you don't have to go into delivery hero, in Germany. You don't have to go into the store. You don't have to go there. You can just make use of a prompt, and AI is going to bring it to you out. So one of the other things we need to do basically in Africa is to make sure we are embracing AI. So we kind of passing law that kind of embracing AI, and we can
right. And I'm guessing investment spending also has to come. Yeah. We're seeing the likes of Google actually forecasting that they're going to spend more capital expenditure on AI. Even the likes of Tesla too, and they're saying, you know what? Don't worry about what we're spending. Don't worry about what we're going to make, from this spend so far. But we have to make this investment. Well, I guess we'll keep tracking this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure.
David Taiwo Balogun, data scientist. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much. It's good to have me here.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. So another issue right here, looking at commodities at this point, sweet potatoes are becoming an increasingly important staple in Nigeria's food basket, serving as a cheaper alternative to Irish potatoes and key ingredient in flour. And recently, data from the FDC shows that from early June 2026, 100 kg bag costs about 35,000 naira. That has risen to 70,000 naira. That's in July. So it's about 35k increase, percentage about 100% higher. Let's bring in an analyst now from financial derivatives company, Favor Adekunle. Great to have you, Favor. What's driving this recent surge there? That's 100% month to month.
Good afternoon, Ladi. Thank you for having me. So like you've rightly said, the price of a 100 kg bag of sweet potatoes has increased by 100% from 35,000 naira in early June to now 70,000 naira. And this is a result of a number of factors. The major one being that, a lot of tuber crops such as yam, Irish potatoes, they've increased in price. We see where, 3 tubers of yam now is being sold for about 21,000 naira. And so a lot of people are looking for major alternatives which they could buy, and it will be more affordable for them and cheaper. And so a lot of people are turning to sweet potatoes. So even though the price has increased, it's still a much more affordable option than the likes of yam and Irish potato, which is much more expensive. So this has led to an increase in the price of sweet potato. There's high demand for it. Another thing is insecurity in the major producing states of this commodity, like Kano, Katsina, Kaduna. It has discouraged farmers, because of threats to their life, from farming on their farmlands. And this will definitely reduce the supply of what we're supposed to have. There's also high transportation and logistics costs. We know what's currently going on. There's a renewed tension between US, Iran, and also the Gulf region as well. And so we've seen where Brent has hit $90 this week, $93, $98 per barrel, and definitely to have an effect on us here in Nigeria. And so that translates into logistics costs when you're bringing these goods from where they are being produced to other states where they will be sold again and being consumed. So these are the major factors that has led to the increase in the price of sweet potato.
We know Nigeria is one of the world's largest producers of sweet potatoes, yet presence in the global export market that remains quite limited.
Yes, definitely. Compared to the likes of China, I would say even Tanzania and Malawi, we do not export as much. So I would say that it is not majorly a demand problem, because we produce over 4 million tons yearly and consume 2.7 million, right? Approximately that. And so there's still enough that is left to do something with. But I would say it's majorly a structural challenge or issue. Take, for example, sweet potato is highly perishable, right, and it's prone to post-harvest losses, and we don't even have the adequate storage facilities or cold chain structures, for preserving these things whereby it is export ready, right? Another issue is our mechanization processes. A lot of farmers are still on the traditional farming levels and the likes. And so if we even have these issues, how will we now move to the processing capacities when we're talking about value addition, where this can be turned to flour chips that can be exported, because they are much more easier to be exported rather, and because that is the beauty of maybe competitiveness now, global competitiveness. And so I'll say all of these have contributed to why we don't have the capacity as much to export. So I'll say Nigeria, we should improve on our storage facilities, and mechanization, modern farming practices. We should also work on meeting international standards, right? Phytosanitary standards to enable us qualify for our products even being able to be exported out of the country.
All right, Favor, I guess it's the same issues, the same problems, that I studied in secondary school, and here I am, and it's still the same issues at this point. Thank you so much, Favor. I definitely hope we make better use of these resources. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Ladi.
All right, let's get a check on the markets now. Let's see how they're doing. We see the banks are rallying again at Custom Street. That's right here in Nigeria. First Holdco, Access Core, GTCO, Zenith, all adding to the share price today. We'll also see it for the industrials, Blood Cement, popping up the all-share index 0.55% at intraday. We also see some consumer good names there also adding to the share price today. But for Johannesburg Stock Exchange, that's down about 0.96% so far, losing the 110,000 level. Let's flip over to other parts of Africa now. We'll see for North Africa, the EGX30 down 0.11%. The Nairobi Stock Exchange closing in positive territory yesterday at 0.37% higher. Let's get a check on the Gulf region now. I was talking about the UAE. We see the Dubai index 0.28% higher, Abu Dhabi index 0.70% higher, but it's mixed sentiment there in the UAE, and we see investors monitoring what's happening, especially with the attack on some Saudi ships at this point, and the risk premium is actually rising around the Strait of Hormuz. Let's get a check on Saudi Arabia. We see right at the Qatari index 0.45% lower. Total marginally up about 6 basis points. Let's flip over to other parts now. U.S. equity futures, they dropped today as oil prices surged amid escalating conflict in the Middle East, while investors weighing quarterly results from two of the largest companies in the world. We've seen the likes of Tesla and Alphabet after releasing their results. For Tesla there, they meet expectations when it comes to earnings per share. Expected was about 51 cents, but they got about 33 cents. Revenue was much better at $28.24 billion, beating expectation of 25.7 billion. But investors will still be reacting to what's played out so far. For Asia, South Korea's Kospi-led gains in Asian markets today, ending the day at about 4.40% higher at 7,096 points. Samsung, SK Hynix, which are Kospi heavyweights there, helped drag the market up, rising about 3.65 and over 4% respectively. Hang Seng Index 1.28% higher to close. Let's flip over to other parts. And the low laggard as India, 0.58% lower, 23,857 points there. Maybe wondering if this 23,000 level will hold going forward. Let's take it on to Europe now. Let's see what's happening there. We have Lars Holter over there in Europe. Lars, I did hear from a birdie that the markets are down there. They were sliding earlier.
That's correct. We are down. We have actually been down all day. And maybe the only big item here on today's schedule that maybe could have influenced the market a little bit more was the ECB meeting that is just over now. And the ECB, the committee there, left the interest rate for the Eurozone unchanged as had been expected. So we're not seeing any big reactions either. Just around now, actually, we're going to get some more information from the ECB on how they exactly exactly feel about the market environment, which is obviously interesting in terms of inflation that we're seeing right now. So we'll see what's developing further into the afternoon. And other than that, of course, Ladi, people here are also looking at those quarterly numbers from the US that you were just referring to. But I think those numbers haven't yet really inspired anyone here.
Yeah, no inspiration at this point in Europe. All right, let's look at the auto industry. We see the German automaker Volkswagen there. They've announced major cuts recently with up to 100,000 jobs on the line and 4 plants likely to be shut. For one plant, however, the company had a rescue plan, but it seems there's a twist. What can you tell us about this?
Yeah, it's interesting here, Ladi. It's been known for a while. Like I said, Volkswagen was struggling and that had layoffs coming. So obviously they were looking into different concepts to save any of the plants rather than shutting them entirely. And for that one particular plant in the northern German city of Osnabrück, that is a plant with 2,300 employees, they had a solution. Volkswagen wanted to actually enter a joint venture with Israeli defense company Rafael Advanced Defense Systems. And the plan was to have components for Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system manufactured there. Now, besides the fact that, of course, some of the employees were not too keen on switching from auto to defense manufacturing, Volkswagen did run into a much bigger problem. The Qatari Sovereign Wealth Fund, known as a Qatar Investment Authority, they're Volkswagen's 3rd largest shareholder, and they actually vetoed the plan.
So how can Qatar have that much influence over a German company?
Well, Ladi, Volkswagen might be the largest German automaker, but it obviously has a very strong global presence, not only in terms of selling cars around the world, but also in terms of listing shares in markets that are openly traded and, of course, attracting capital from wherever it may come. And now as for Qatar, they became a Volkswagen shareholder in 2009 when Volkswagen, Qatar had to rescue automaker Porsche. At the time, Porsche tried to buy up Volkswagen. They borrowed billions to do so. The deal failed and Porsche needed a bailout to avoid bankruptcy. It got capital by selling options to Qatar, and the fund then later converted these options into a 17% voting stake in Volkswagen. Now, the Gulf state has 3 seats on the Volkswagen board, and they have made it clear that they won't allow a joint venture with Israel, especially not one that serves to build parts for the Iron Dome.
So what can Volkswagen do now? Is there a chance, for the deal to happen, anyway?
Yeah, it's very unlikely. There is, in fact, a plan out now that would see the Osnabrück plant being divested and turned into a separate entity owned then by 2 companies. One would be run by Volkswagen and entail only the plant itself and the personnel there. And the Israeli firm Rafael Advanced Defense Systems, they would actually not be involved in that part. The other company, however, would be a joint venture between Rafael and possibly the German state of Lower Saxony. That is where Volkswagen's headquarters are, and they would be in charge of production. Volkswagen would not play a role in this, and then Qatar could not block this part of the deal. However, the state is currently checking whether such a deal would be viable and whether it would warrant investing taxpayers' money. Meanwhile, Israel's Rafael already has a new option on the table, and this is probably where this ends for Volkswagen, because Rafael says they're looking into manufacturing the parts they need in India now. They will keep them out of a political pickle here in Germany. But it would also, of course, mean that Volkswagen is back to square one with regards to that plant that is, as of now, actually still making cars, the T-Roc convertible model, but that will see production end by the end of the year.
All right, I guess we'll keep tracking that EV competition at this point. Thank you so much, Lars.
Thank you, Ladi.
All right, let's get a check on digital assets at this point. How are they doing? We did see, Bitcoin try to make that run above $66,000, but that's not holding at this point. Might be just, some profit taking, but it looks like there's some, sell pressure coming around that $66,000 level. Maybe it's a resistance zone. 1,900 for Ethereum, 0.96% lower. XRP, big 1.13% drop there. Other half of the screen, we see a couple of green spots there. TON, Cardano, HBAR, and stable coins there, with some investors trying to get into some stability. Now, let's look at some of the headlines there. No news here. We see Donald Trump earned about $1.4 billion from his cryptocurrency ventures in 2025, according to the annual financial disclosure his administration filed with the U.S. Office of Government Ethics. That was on June 30th, making digital assets the single largest source of income during his first full year back in the White House. The 927-page filing released to the public, that's for July 2nd, after a 30-day extension, put the president's total income for the year at roughly $2.2 billion. That's what the president made there in the U.S. Then cryptocurrency exchange BitMEX, they've confirmed that they will shut down operations effective September 23rd, and said that users' assets remain safe and under their control. The owner and operator of BitMEX, HDR Global Trading, made the decision as part of a strategic review of the business. That's according to a post on X. And they're urging users to, close their open positions right now. Then we see Texas residents have lost over $1 billion to crypto scams. That was the whole of last year. All right, that's how major markets we track are looking today. We'll give you the TGIF trade tomorrow. We'll see if some of these assets make a better recovery. Thank you for watching. I'm Ladi Williams. Bye for now.